Hello, my dear ones. My name is Margaret Hale, though most people around here just call me Maggie. Before I begin this story, tell me, where are you watching from tonight? I love knowing how far my stories travel. Maybe you're listening from across the ocean or from a cozy little room somewhere warm, sipping tea like I am now. Wherever you are, I want you to sit back and listen closely, because what happened that day in my kitchen still makes my hands tremble whenever I think about it. You see, that morning started as ordinary as any other. The sun peeked through the curtains, the air smelled of rain and fresh bread, and I was humming an old tune my late husband used to play on the piano. I had planned a simple trip to the market, nothing special, just eggs, flour, and the fresh herbs my daughter-in-law, Clara, loved to use when she cooked. Clara had moved in with my son Peter about 3 years ago after they married. She was quiet, always polite, with eyes that smiled even when her mouth didn't. I'd grown to trust her deeply, even to depend on her. I used to tell people, Clara's more like a daughter than an in-law. But sometimes when people are too perfect, too careful, there's something they're hiding. That morning I told her, I'll be gone an hour or two, dear. If Peter comes by, tell him I'll be back before lunch. She smiled and nodded, her hands folded like a saint's. I left feeling peaceful, never suspecting what I would find when I came back. The market was crowded, noisy, full of chatter and laughter. I bought my vegetables, a loaf of bread, and even treated myself to a little bunch of yellow daisies. But halfway through paying, I realized my wallet wasn't in my bag. I sighed, embarrassed, and told the grocer I'd run back for it. I remember walking home thinking only of how forgetful I'd become, how Clara would probably tease me about my old age brain again. Yet when I turned the corner and saw my little white house at the end of the lane, something felt wrong. The curtains were drawn even though I'd left them open, and faintly I heard voices, one of them Clara's. At first I smiled, thinking maybe Peter had come home early. But the second voice, it wasn't Peter's. It was low, sharp, and male. She won't find out, the man said. I froze in place, the flowers trembling in my hands. I crept closer, careful not to make the porch creak, and peeked through the small gap in the kitchen curtain. Clara stood by the stove, her back to me, stirring something in a pot, but her shoulders were tense, and she kept glancing toward the door like a guilty child. The man was sitting at my table, wearing a black jacket, his face half in shadow. He had a small pouch on the table, and I swear I saw her slip something shiny into it, something that glinted even under the dim light. It's done, she whispered. She'll never notice until it's too late. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might faint. What wouldn't I notice? What had she taken? For a moment I thought of bursting in, demanding answers, but instinct told me to wait. Instead, I crouched beneath the window, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. You did well, the man said, his tone cold. Once she's out of the picture, the house is ours. I nearly gasped out loud, but covered my mouth just in time. Out of the picture, they were talking about me. My knees went weak, and I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the steps. The clatter made Clara's head snap toward the window, but I ran before she could see me. I hid behind the old oak tree across the street, trembling so hard I could barely breathe. My mind spun. Had she planned to steal from me? Or was this something darker? After a few minutes, the man left, glancing up and down the street before disappearing around the corner. Clara stood in the doorway, watching him go, then turned back inside. I waited until the door shut before daring to move. My feet carried me away from that house almost by instinct. I didn't even realize I was crying until I tasted salt on my lips. Have you ever trusted someone so completely only to feel the ground crumble beneath you? It's like waking up from a dream and realizing the warmth beside you was just the fire dying down. I sat on a bench near the park, shaking, replaying their words again and again. I didn't want to believe it. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe she was in trouble. But out of the picture, those words gnawed at me. My dear listeners, if this story already has your heart racing, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to my channel for more stories like this, and share it with someone who loves a good mystery. Because what I discovered when I went back into that kitchen changed everything I thought I knew about love, family, and trust itself. I must have sat on that park bench for nearly an hour, staring at the ground while the world moved on around me. Children ran past laughing, a dog barked somewhere down the street, and there I was, a 72-year-old woman with trembling hands, trying to make sense of the impossible. Clara, my sweet daughter-in-law, the one who called me Mom and brought me tea every night, had just plotted something terrible in my own kitchen, and not just with anyone, but with a stranger who'd spoken as if my home already belonged to them. I knew I couldn't just sit there, so I gathered what little courage I had left and walked back toward the house, careful to stay hidden behind the hedges as I approached. The man was gone, thank heaven, but Clara was still inside. I saw her through the window, pacing the kitchen with her phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low, but the silence of the afternoon carried her words to me. "Yes, I gave it to him," she said softly. "He said he'll take care of the rest. By tomorrow, she'll have no idea what happened." My heart stopped. Who was she? Me. I crept closer to the window, the gravel crunching under my shoes, praying she wouldn't hear. Then she turned suddenly toward the sink, and I ducked behind the bushes. For a moment, all I could hear was the sound of running water. When I peeked again, she was wiping the counter, humming as if nothing had happened. I couldn't bear it. I needed answers, but not from her, not yet. So I did something I never thought I'd do at my age. I went to see Harold Green, my late husband's old friend, and once the sheriff of our small town before he retired. He still lived 2 streets away, in a tidy house that smelled of pipe smoke and old leather. When he opened the door and saw me pale and shaking, he ushered me inside without a word. "Maggie," he said, setting a cup of coffee in front of me, "you look like you've seen a ghost." I told him everything, every word, every detail, and watched the disbelief fade into something colder, sharper. "You did the right thing coming to me," he said finally. "Don't confront her yet. Let's find out who that man was." He promised to check the local CCTV near the Market Road. Before I left, he handed me an old recorder. "If she talks again, get it on tape." I nodded, clutching it like a lifeline. That night I returned home pretending nothing was wrong. Clara greeted me with her usual sweet smile. "Did you forget something, Mother?" she asked, as if she hadn't just betrayed me. I forced a smile. "Just my wallet. Getting old, I suppose." She laughed softly and offered me tea, her hands steady, her eyes innocent. I watched her move around the kitchen, every gesture so normal it almost made me doubt myself. But when she reached for the sugar jar, I noticed something strange. Her wedding ring was missing. Clara never took it off, not even when washing dishes. My eyes flicked to the counter, where a small piece of paper lay half-tucked under a tray. She must have seen me glance at it because she quickly covered it with her hand. "Oh, that's nothing," she said lightly, smiling. "Just a shopping list." But her tone was off, too quick, too bright. When she turned her back, I slipped my hand into my apron pocket and pressed the record button. "Clara," I said casually, "you had a visitor today, didn't you?" She froze for just a heartbeat before replying, "No, not really. Maybe the mailman." I smiled faintly. Funny, because I thought I saw someone leaving. She turned slowly, her eyes meeting mine. For the first time, I saw something hard flicker there, something that didn't belong to the sweet girl I'd welcomed into my home. "You must be mistaken," she said, her voice flat now. "You shouldn't worry yourself over little things." I laughed softly to hide my fear. "Oh, you know me, always worrying." I took my tea and went upstairs, locking the door behind me. That night I played the recording over and over. Her calm, her quick denial, it all screamed guilt. Harold called later to say he'd found something. The man you described, he said, matches a face we've seen before. Name's Dale Mercer. He's been mixed up in property scams for years. My knees nearly gave out, so she's working with him, I whispered. Looks that way, he said grimly. If I'm right, she's after your deed, the one to your house. I clutched the phone so tight my knuckles ached. My house, the one my husband built with his own hands, the one I plan to leave to Peter someday. What do I do, Harold? I asked. You wait, he said. You act normal, but don't let her know you're on to her. And for heaven's sake, don't be alone with her if you can help it. After I hung up, I sat in bed, the house creaking softly around me, wondering how much of what I'd called family had been built on lies. As the clock ticked past midnight, I whispered to the empty room, What are you planning, Clara? And why here in my kitchen? The next morning, I woke with a heaviness that settled deep in my chest, the kind that doesn't lift even with sunlight streaming through the curtains. I could smell coffee brewing downstairs. Clara, humming softly again, as if she didn't have a secret in the world. My mind replayed Harold's warning like a broken record. She's after your deed. I dressed slowly, careful to hide the recorder in the pocket of my cardigan, and went downstairs. Good morning, Mother, she said brightly when she saw me. Her voice was sugar, her smile honey, but I saw the tightness at the corners of her mouth. Morning, I replied, sitting at the table. She poured my coffee and added just the right amount of cream, like she always did. I studied her hands, steady, graceful, and wondered how those same hands could pass stolen papers to a criminal. Peter left early, she said casually. He's meeting a client out of town. My heart sank a little. I would have felt safer if my son were home, though lately he seemed distracted, his phone always buzzing with work calls he never explained. Clara, I said carefully, you've been working hard lately. Is everything all right? She froze for a fraction of a second before smiling again. Of course, everything's fine. But her eyes slid away from mine. I wanted to press her, but Harold's words echoed. Act normal. So I nodded and let it go, at least for now. After breakfast, she went out to run errands, leaving me alone in the house. The moment the door shut, I felt both relief and guilt. I hated snooping, but I had to know. I searched the kitchen first, my hands trembling as I opened drawers and cabinets. Everything seemed normal until I noticed a small key taped under the table. My husband used to hide spare keys that way, but this one was new and shiny. I took it, my pulse racing, and tried it on the drawer of the sideboard, the one where I kept old documents. It fit. Inside were the usual bills and letters, but beneath them was a folder I'd never seen before. Inside that folder was a set of printed papers, copies of the house deed, but with my signature forged at the bottom. I felt the room tilt. My knees nearly gave out as I flipped through them, seeing my name spelled perfectly, but the handwriting was just slightly wrong. The loops tighter, neater. Clara's handwriting. Oh, dear God, I whispered. I took photos of the documents with my phone and called Harold immediately. You were right, I said, my voice shaking. I found fake deeds. He told me to stay calm and to keep everything hidden. Don't confront her yet, he warned. If she's working with Mercer, she might not be alone in this. I agreed, though fear twisted my stomach into knots. Not long after, I heard the car pull up outside. Clara was back. I quickly slid the folder back, taped the key where I'd found it, and pretended to be reading when she entered. You're still here? She asked lightly, hanging her coat. Where else would I be? I replied. She smiled, but her eyes darted toward the sideboard for just an instant, barely noticeable. That night after dinner, I watched her more closely. She was restless, checking her phone repeatedly, biting her lip. I knew she was expecting someone or something. When she went upstairs to shower, I slipped out onto the porch and called Harold again. "She's nervous," I whispered. "I think something's happening tonight. He told me to keep my doors locked and lights off. If anything happens, call me first," he said. After I hung up, I waited in the dim living room, pretending to read. At about 9 o'clock, I heard the faint creak of the back door. My heart stopped. I moved quietly toward the kitchen, every step slow, my bare feet silent on the wood. Through the doorway, I saw a flicker of flashlight light, a hand rifling through drawers. It was Clara. She moved like someone who'd done this before, checking under the table, then opening the sideboard. When she found the folder missing, she froze. Her breathing quickened, and I saw her pull out her phone and whisper, "It's not here. Someone took it." My fingers clenched around my phone, recording her every word. "No," she whispered again. "I don't think she knows. She's too old to notice." I wanted to shout, "Too old?" but I bit my tongue and kept still. After a few tense moments, she slammed the drawer shut and left, locking the door behind her. I sank to the floor, shaking uncontrollably, realizing just how deep her deception ran. She wasn't just taking my home. She was mocking me, using my kindness as her shield. Later, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I thought of Peter and wondered, did he know? Was he part of this? My heart ached to think it, but I couldn't ignore the way he'd grown distant lately. The next morning, when he called to say he'd be away for another few days, my suspicions deepened. Something was terribly wrong, and I had to uncover it before it was too late. The rain that night came down in silver threads, steady and endless, drumming against the window panes like a heartbeat I couldn't calm. I sat by the dim lamp in the parlor, pretending to read, though the words on the page blurred together uselessly. My mind wouldn't let go of what I'd learned. Forged deeds, stolen trust, and my son's wife standing in my kitchen whispering with a criminal. Fear had turned into anger now. Not the loud kind that burns hot, but the slow, cold kind that settles deep, like winter frost creeping through the floorboards. The clock ticked towards 7 when my phone finally buzzed. It was Harold. "Maggie," he said, voice tight. "We found Mercer's car near the edge of town. She met him again tonight, just after dark. The cameras caught her." My stomach twisted. "Where?" I asked. "Old Harper Mill." My pulse stuttered. Everyone in town knew the mill, the sagging, flood-damaged shell that kids dared each other to explore on Halloween. I stared out the window at the storm, at the narrow road slick with rain. Something inside me whispered that waiting would be worse than danger itself. I grabbed my coat, the small recorder, and the flashlight from the drawer, and I left. I didn't tell Harold because I knew he'd stop me. I told myself it was foolish bravery, but it was something closer to desperation. The streets were empty except for the rain, and by the time I reached the mill, the hem of my skirt was soaked through, clinging to my legs. I moved slowly, hugging the wall as I crept inside. The smell of damp wood and rust filled the air. My flashlight beam caught dust dancing in the air like ghosts. Then I heard voices, hers and his. "You didn't tell me she saw you," Mercer growled. "She didn't," Clara snapped. "She was at the market all morning." "You'd better be right," he said, "because if she starts asking questions, the deal's off. We don't need the old bat ruining this." Old bat. I felt heat rise in my cheeks even as fear froze my limbs. Clara exhaled shakily. "I'll make her sign the transfer papers tomorrow. Peter thinks it's just insurance. She trusts me. One signature and the house is ours." I pressed record. My fingers trembled so hard, I thought the small device would slip. Mercer laughed, a sound like gravel grinding. "You've got nerve, I'll give you that. Don't grow a conscience now." Clara said nothing. only looked down at the floor. For a moment I almost pitied her. Almost. Then she whispered, "Just make sure he keeps his promise. Once this is done, we're even." Even? What debt did she owe him? My mind churned. Then Mercer moved closer, his shadow falling across her face. "You're too soft," he said. "If she refuses to sign, there are other ways to make her." I couldn't listen anymore. I turned to leave, but the old floorboard under my shoe betrayed me with a long, echoing creak. The sound bounced through the hollow space like a gunshot. Their voices stopped. "Someone's here," Mercer hissed. A flashlight beam slashed through the dark, and I ducked behind a collapsed beam, clutching the recorder to my chest. My breathing was so loud I was sure they could hear it. "Probably just the wind," Clara said, but her voice trembled. I waited until I heard their footsteps fade. Then I crawled backward toward the broken window I'd come through, glass crunching softly under my palms. The night air hit my face cold and sharp, and I ran, or what passes for running when you're 72 and terrified. The rain soaked through my coat, but I didn't stop until the lights of town glimmered ahead. When I finally reached home, Harold's truck was already there. He'd been watching my street all night, waiting to make sure I was safe. When he saw my face, he knew. "You went there, didn't you?" he said. I nodded, unable to speak. I handed him the recorder, and he pressed his thumb against the play button. As Clara's voice filled the room, his expression hardened. "That's enough to bring them both in," he said. "We'll go to the police in the morning." I sank onto the couch, my wet coat dripping onto the rug, my body trembling from more than just cold. "She was supposed to be my daughter," I whispered. "I don't understand why." Harold sighed, sitting across from me. "Greed makes people forget who they are, Maggie. But tomorrow will end this." Before dawn broke, a soft knock came at the door. I looked through the peephole and felt my stomach turn. Clara stood there holding a basket of muffins, her hair neat, her smile calm as spring sunlight. "Good morning, Mother," she said sweetly when I opened the door. "I thought you might want breakfast." I forced a shaky smile, letting her in. She set the basket down, eyes scanning the room quickly, as if checking for something. "You were up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep," I murmured. She nodded, taking off her coat. "Peter called this morning. He's coming by soon. He wants to go over the paperwork with you. He said you had questions about the deed." Her tone was smooth, but I saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. She was accelerating her plan, desperate to finish it before I could expose her. I smiled faintly. "Yes," I said. "Let's discuss it when he gets here." She turned toward the kitchen, humming that same tune she always hummed when lying. I waited until she was out of sight, then looked toward the window, whispering, "Tomorrow, Clara, tomorrow the truth will belong to me." And my dear listeners, if your heart is racing as mine was that night, please remember to like this story, subscribe to my channel, and share it with someone who loves mysteries that burn slowly but end with fire. Because the next part of this tale will show you just how dangerous it can be when a liar realizes she's been caught. Morning crept in pale and gray, the kind of light that makes everything look softer than it really is, though nothing felt soft inside me. Clara moved around the kitchen, humming as usual, her rhythm as steady as the ticking clock, and every sound felt like a test of my resolve. I had not slept at all. I'd spent the long hours watching the window, waiting for the first streaks of dawn, thinking about what would happen when Peter arrived. I wanted to believe that my son would see truth when it stared at him, that blood would matter more than manipulation. But the fear that she had poisoned him with lies gnawed at me. Harold called just after 8. "I've spoken with the officer in charge," he said. "They'll need the recording and the forged documents as evidence. I can drive you there this afternoon?" I told him to come by around noon, though part of me dreaded what that confrontation might bring. By 9, Peter's car pulled up. I stood behind the curtain, my pulse pounding as he stepped out, his jacket collar turned up against the chill, his eyes shadowed with something unreadable. Clara met him at the door, her smile wide and bright, the perfect wife greeting her husband. "You made it," she said, kissing his cheek. I heard the faintest tension in his voice when he answered, "Yeah, let's just get this done." I waited in the hall until they both stepped into the dining room, papers in hand. "Mother," Peter called. "Clara said you wanted to talk about the property documents?" I walked in slowly, every step deliberate, my expression calm though my stomach was in knots. "Yes," I said softly, taking a seat. Clara placed a stack of papers before me. "It's just a small update for insurance. Nothing serious. Peter thought you might sign before the agent arrives." Her tone was honey, but her fingers clutched the pen too tightly. I looked at my son. "Did you read these?" He hesitated. Clara explained everything. It's routine. I picked up the first page and scanned the fine print. The words "transfer of ownership" glared up at me like a snake waiting to strike. I pushed the page toward him. "Routine?" I asked quietly. "Peter, this would sign the house over completely." He blinked, confusion flickering across his face. "What? That can't be right." Clara laughed lightly. "Oh, Mother, you're misreading. It's legal wording." "Then you won't mind if Harold looks at it," I interrupted. Her smile faltered. Peter glanced between us. "Harold? Why?" "Because he's been helping me understand things," I said, keeping my voice calm. "And he found something interesting." I pulled the recorder from my pocket and pressed play. The room filled with the sound of Clara's voice. She trusts me. One signature in the house is ours. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush the air. Peter's eyes widened. "Clara," he whispered, "what is that?" She went pale, her lips parting, but no words came. "Peter, she's twisting things," she said finally, her voice shaking. "That's not what." "Enough," I said sharply. "I saw you with Mercer." I heard every word. "The police have the proof." Clara's mask broke then, the sweetness drained from her face, replaced by something cold and sharp. "You old fool," she spat. "You think you can ruin everything?" Peter stepped back, horror dawning in his eyes. "Is this true?" he asked. "You tried to steal from my mother?" She turned to him, desperate now. "You don't understand. He. But he was already moving away. "Get out," he said quietly. She froze. "Peter, please." "Get out," he shouted, voice cracking. The sound hit the walls like thunder. She grabbed her coat and rushed toward the door, her shoulders trembling. For a moment I almost pitied her again, but pity had no place left in my heart. When the door slammed behind her, the house fell into the kind of silence that hurts. Peter sank into a chair, covering his face with his hands. "How could I have been so blind?" he whispered. I sat beside him and laid a hand on his arm. "Because you loved her," I said softly. "That's what love does. It makes us see what we hope to see." He nodded slowly, tears sliding down his cheeks. "I'll fix this," he said. "I'll make sure she answers for what she's done." I squeezed his hand. "We'll do it together." As noon came, Harold arrived, his face grim but resolute. He collected the evidence, promising that by nightfall Clara and Mercer would both be in custody. But even as he left, I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't truly over. I had lived long enough to know that people like Clara don't vanish quietly. Sometimes they come back when you least expect them, carrying with them the unfinished edges of a story that refuses to end. That night, as the rain began again, I double-locked the doors and kept a lamp burning in the kitchen, the same kitchen where it had all started, because light, I've learned, is the best weapon against the dark. For the first time in weeks, the house was quiet again. But it wasn't peace that filled the silence. It was the echo of everything that had just fallen apart. After Harold left and Peter went upstairs to rest, I sat alone in the parlor, staring at the rain sliding down the window in crooked lines. I wanted to feel relief, to believe it was over, but my instincts refused to rest. Clara was gone, yes, but people like her didn't vanish. They regrouped, they plotted, they waited. The clock struck midnight before I finally stood, stretching my stiff legs. I poured myself some tea, the warmth steadying my hands, and walked toward the kitchen. That's when I saw it, the small envelope lying on the floor just inside the back door, wet from the rain. My heart thumped as I bent down to pick it up. The paper was damp, but my name was written across it in neat, familiar handwriting, Margaret. I opened it carefully, the edges tearing under my fingers, and read the few words inside. You think you've won, but there's something you don't know about your husband's will. My breath caught. The teacup slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. For a long moment, I couldn't move. My husband, God rest his soul, had died nearly 10 years ago. His will had been clear. The house, the land, everything to me. So what could she mean? I sat at the table, the letter trembling in my hands, trying to piece together what she might be playing at. Just then Peter came down, rubbing his eyes. Mother, are you all right? I heard something break. I hid the note under a magazine before he could see it and forced a weak smile. Just clumsy me, I said softly. He frowned. You should get some sleep. I nodded, though I knew I wouldn't. When he went back upstairs, I pulled the note out again, studying the words. The ink was smudged, but the handwriting was undeniably hers. Had she meant it as a threat? Or was there something truly hidden in my husband's papers? I decided to check. I went to the study where we kept all our important documents. The old filing cabinet creaked as I pulled it open, revealing decades of paperwork, tax forms, letters, bills, but nothing about a second will. I searched every drawer, even the hollow under the desk where my husband used to stash little surprises for me, but found nothing. Then, when I leaned back to rest my eyes, the floorboard beneath the desk groaned. I pressed on it absent-mindedly, and to my astonishment it lifted slightly under my hand. My heart raced. I knelt, pried it open, and found a small tin box tucked inside, dusty and sealed with an old piece of twine. My fingers trembled as I untied it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to my husband from someone named Elaine. My heart stopped. I'd never heard the name before, but the tone of the first letter made my stomach twist. It wasn't business, it was love. I sank back, stunned, flipping through them one by one. The last letter was dated 2 weeks before his death. She can't find out, it read. Not until it's all settled. I'll make sure Clara's taken care of. My vision blurred. Clara's name, there, in black ink. My husband knew her before she ever married Peter. My hands shook so violently I had to put the letters down. 1,000 thoughts tore through me. Was she blackmailing him? Was he helping her somehow? The world spun. I could almost hear Clara's mocking voice whispering, You think you've won. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think clearly. The past could wait until morning. I locked the box in the drawer and sat by the fire, staring at the flames until dawn. When Harold arrived that morning, I told him everything. He listened quietly, his brow furrowing deeper with every word. This changes things, he said. If there's another connection between your husband and her, we need to find out how deep it runs. Maybe that's what she was after all along. Not just the house, but whatever secret he left behind. I nodded slowly, clutching the teacup between my hands to steady them. Harold, I whispered, do you think he was involved in something? He didn't answer immediately. I think, he said at last, that sometimes people we love keep secrets to protect us, and sometimes to protect themselves. But we'll find the truth, Maggie. I promise you that. That night, as the fire crackled low and the shadows stretched long across the floor, I stared at the tin box sitting on the table and wondered just how much of my life had been built on lies I was never meant to uncover. The next morning began with a hush that felt almost sacred, the kind that comes only after storms when the world holds its breath to see what remains. I had spent the night in the armchair by the fire, the tin box of letters sitting on the table beside me like a silent judge. When the first pale streaks of dawn slipped through the curtains, I brewed coffee and waited for Harold. He arrived still wearing his coat, his hat dripping rain, his eyes heavy with the same sleeplessness that haunted me. I poured him a cup, and together we read through the letters again, page by page, until the last one burned like ice in my hands. "Elaine Morgan," he murmured. "I know that name. She worked bookkeeping for Graves Realty. Your husband was consulting for them right before he died." He leaned closer, his finger tracing a line of faded ink. "If I'm not mistaken, Maggie, Elaine Morgan was Clara's mother." The words struck like thunder. "Her mother?" I whispered. "Then she knew him." Harold nodded slowly. "It fits. Elaine died owing debts. Maybe your husband tried to help her. Maybe he set up that trust you found mentioned." I stared into the fire. So this whole plot, the forged papers, the lies, it wasn't just greed, it was revenge. He sighed. Grief and money twist people the same way rust eats iron. He reached into his coat and handed me a photocopy. "This is your husband's last amendment. He created a trust for E. Morgan. Clara probably found it after her mother died. She convinced herself you were hiding something meant for her." The thought made my stomach knot. All this heartbreak because of secrets left to fester. "What do we do now?" I asked. "We find her before Mercer does," he said. But by noon word had spread that Mercer's car had been discovered near the river, empty. No one had seen either of them since the previous night. The sheriff promised a search, but deep down I knew desperate people don't wait to be found. I spent the afternoon pacing, glancing at the window every few minutes, expecting headlights, a knock, a shadow. When dusk finally settled, exhaustion pulled at my bones. I decided to burn the letters. Maybe fire could cleanse what truth had tainted. Yet as I struck the match, guilt stopped me. These weren't just secrets. They were pieces of a story my son deserved to know. I sealed them in an envelope marked for Peter when the time is right. The wind outside howled as I blew out the candle. Then a knock, gentle, hesitant, like someone asking permission to breathe. I froze, heart hammering. Through the peephole I saw a face pale under the porch light. Clara. Rain matted her hair. Her coat clung to her shoulders. "Please," she whispered, trembling. "Don't call the police. I just need to talk." Everything in me wanted to slam the door, yet compassion, the stubborn, foolish kind, made me open it. "You shouldn't be here," I said. "They're looking for you." She stepped inside anyway, water dripping onto the rug. "I had nowhere else." "Mercer, he tried to kill me." Her voice cracked. "He found out I wanted to tell you everything." She wrapped her arms around herself like a frightened child. "He took the trust papers, said he'd make you sign over the house anyway. When I refused, he hit me. I ran." Her face was bruised, her lips split. Anger flared in me, anger at her lies, at Mercer, at the years of deception that had stolen my peace. Still, I fetched a blanket and draped it over her shoulders. "Sit," I said. "Start from the beginning." Between sobs, she told me the whole twisted story, her mother's affair with my husband, the trust he'd created to pay Elaine's debts, how after Elaine's death she'd found the letters and assumed I'd hidden the money out of spite. "I wanted to hate you," she whispered, "but when I met Peter, I fell in love for real. Then Mercer came along saying he could help me claim what was mine. I was a fool." She looked up, tears glinting. I never wanted to hurt you. I believed her, or maybe I wanted to. I sighed and poured her tea. You made terrible choices, child, I said quietly, but running won't fix them. She nodded, exhausted. Can I stay here tonight? Just until morning? I hesitated, then finally said yes, but tomorrow we tell Harold everything. I locked the doors, checked the windows twice, and set a lamp by her room. Long after she'd fallen asleep, I sat awake, watching the shadows dance across the walls. My heart ached with confusion, pity and anger, forgiveness and fear, all tangled together. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, slow and low, promising another storm. I whispered to the empty air, "If you can hear me, Thomas, give me strength for what's coming." For I knew dawn would not bring peace but reckoning, and the house that had seen so many secrets was about to witness its last and most dangerous one. That night stretched longer than any I could remember. The house was wrapped in silence except for the rain whispering against the windows, and each creak of the floor made my nerves jump. Clara slept in the guest room, her breathing faint through the wall, while I sat in the kitchen, staring at the clock that refused to move fast enough. The lamp beside me cast a trembling circle of light over the table where so many lies had been born. I kept replaying everything she'd said, measuring truth against deception. A part of me wanted to believe her story about Mercer, but another part whispered that trust was a luxury I could no longer afford. Around 2 a.m, I heard it, the faint crunch of footsteps on gravel outside. My heart seized. I rose slowly, careful not to make a sound, and peered through the window. The rain had eased to a drizzle, and through the mist I saw a shadow moving toward the porch. A man's shape, broad shoulders, slow steps. Mercer. My stomach dropped. I rushed to Clara's room, shaking her awake. "He's here," I whispered. Her eyes went wide, fear flashing through them. "We have to go," she hissed. "He won't stop." But before we could move, the porch light flickered, and a heavy knock thundered through the house. "Maggie!" Harold's voice cut through the air. Relief washed over me so quickly it made my knees weak. I opened the door, letting him in. His face was pale, his coat soaked. "He's nearby," Harold said, breathless. "Sheriff's men are sweeping the road. You two stay put." Clara hovered in the doorway, trembling. Harold turned to her, his tone firm but not cruel. "You'll have to come with us in the morning, Clara. The sheriff needs your statement." She nodded, her voice breaking. "I'll tell them everything, I swear." Before we could speak again, a sound exploded through the night, a sharp crack like glass shattering. The window near the sink burst inward, shards scattering across the floor. I screamed, dragging Clara down as Harold drew his pistol and shouted for Mercer to show himself. Rain and wind poured through the broken window, and for one heartbeat I thought I saw him standing there. Dark coat, wild eyes, before he disappeared into the trees. The sheriff's siren wailed in the distance. Within minutes, lights flashed across the yard and voices filled the air. Mercer was caught near the fence, struggling like a trapped animal, the officers shouting commands over the rain. Clara pressed her face into her hands, sobbing. It was over. Truly over. As dawn broke, the sheriff took our statements. Mercer would face charges for fraud and attempted assault. Clara, for her part, was to testify in exchange for leniency. Before they drove her away, she turned to me, her eyes red and swollen. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, "for everything, for your husband, for the lies." I nodded, too tired to speak. When the cars finally left and the yard was quiet again, I stood on the porch watching the sunlight fight its way through the clouds. Harold touched my shoulder gently. "You did it, Maggie," he said. "You brought the truth into the light." I smiled faintly, though my heart felt heavy with all that truth had cost. "Maybe," I said, but some truths burn longer than lies." He chuckled softly. "Then let them burn. They keep us warm." Weeks passed before the house began to feel like home again. Peter returned often, fixing the shattered window, repainting the kitchen walls, trying to fill the silence with laughter. And though it took time, I forgave Clara, not for her sake, but for mine. I sent her a small letter once, wishing her peace wherever she was. She never replied, but that was all right. Some stories don't need endings, they just need quiet. My dear listeners, if you've stayed with me this far, bless your hearts. If this story made you hold your breath, please take a moment to like it, subscribe to my channel, and share it with someone who loves suspense and truth as much as I do, because your kindness keeps this old voice alive and my little lamp burning. Tonight, as I sit by that same window and watch the rain return, I think of how easily we lose trust and how fiercely we fight to rebuild it. Life teaches us again and again that light doesn't come from perfection. It comes from survival. So wherever you are, hold on to your truth, forgive when you can, and never be afraid to lift the floorboard of fear to see what lies beneath. Good night, my friends. May your homes stay warm, your hearts honest, and your courage unshaken.